Oh my goodness, I cannot believe that you've already done 6 other lessons. This is the 7th lesson, and we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries. Honestly, you cannot talk about healthy boundaries enough. It is at the core of every relationship. In fact, it's kind of that backbone of whether something's going to be healthy or not healthy in relationships. So you're going to be defining boundaries. What do they actually look like? What are boundaries? So let me start with you, Mom. If you've never heard the word boundaries, it's basically just like a picket fence that kind of defines what you are responsible for and what others are responsible for. And it gets really blurry sometimes, depending on our families that we grew up in, our cultures, even our churches, and how we teach boundaries. Sometimes we think that God doesn't have boundaries or that Jesus just loves everyone and does whatever. But the truth is that in the very nature of who God is and in his love, he created boundaries. In fact, love without limits is not love at all. Love has limits. It has a sense of what is the most valuable, what is most respectful. How do I treat my own body, my own mind, my heart and soul with its worth? And how do I treat others the way they deserve to be treated as well? To see them as created by God. And so when it comes to our younger girls, it starts small, with small things like kids being in their personal bubble space. And for every kid, it's different, right? Your more extroverted kid loves being surrounded by lots of people. Maybe the more introverted child is thinking, I need more space, and I prefer having distance. Maybe your child just even has sensory oriented needs, and that determines the kind of boundaries that they have. Maybe it's just the way your family is. Some families are very affectionate and they just come up and give you a hug without even asking. And in other families, they're not even hugging at all. Across the different families, you're going to have different boundaries. But the key about this conversation is wanting you to really shore up your daughter's understanding about how she feels and what she needs and what she wants does matter to God, and it matters in her relationships. So often we can give a subtle or an overt teaching to our daughters that they, in order to love like Jesus, means they have to dismiss completely who they are and get into very uncomfortable situations. For example, sometimes without even thinking, we might say, you need to go give your Uncle Joey a hug or a kiss before we leave, because that's the polite thing to do. But really, that could be a boundary crossing for your child. Maybe they don't know that uncle, or it just feels really unsafe to them for whatever reason. We need to honor those because it transfers over into their other relationships at school, in their dating someday, even into their marriages. So when you're talking about boundaries, you're talking about friendships, you're talking about relationships at school, their teachers, Sunday school teachers, and I don't want you to assume that just because you're in the church, maybe you're even in a Christian school, that boundaries don't need to be addressed. In fact, abuse happens in the church just as much as it happens outside the church. It's such a sad reality, but I think wherever you have people, you have brokenness and hurt and pain. And so that's kind of the extreme side of boundary violations that I'm wanting you to prepare your daughter for. But I want to also recognize that some of you as moms have experienced that kind of boundary violation, where what you wanted, what you needed, what you experienced was completely dismissed. And you were experiencing from maybe even a trusted friend, a trusted parent, a trusted family member, a violation that has still scarred you today. And it's important for you to do the work to heal and to make sure that you actually process that in your own story so that you can help your daughter have a different experience. And then there's some of you who have never had any boundary violations. You grew up in healthy systems where it's just normal that people would respect what you ask. If you say no, they're going to honor that. If you say yes, they're going to honor that. And you might take it for granted that not everybody in your community understands that. And this is the kind of conversation you're going to have with your daughter. I've given you guided questions. It feels heavy. That's normal. It is a heavy conversation, and yet it's such an important one. At this age, even at recess, there's plenty of opportunities to practice setting healthy boundaries. In fact, when Adonaiah, my oldest, was in first grade, she had a boundary violation that I thought was no big deal. I'm actually looking back at that and going, that's my own stuff. But in quiet time, when they would sit down at the rug, the teacher would sit down and want to read them a book. This happened every single day during their routine. There was a boy in her class who would slip his hand under her bottom while she would sit down. And Adonai absolutely felt uncomfortable with that. She tried to use her words. It didn't work. She tried to go to the teacher. It didn't work. She tried to move. It didn't work. And so that was opportunity for my husband and I to actually help her, to come alongside her. And we had a meeting with her teacher. We actually had a meeting with that boy's parents. And that boy had an opportunity to learn that what he was doing was not okay. He was disrespecting her, and he actually owned it and apologized in first grade. That was a significant moment for all of us in that community, for the teacher, for the son, for my daughter, for Jeff and I. But our girls need help learning of when is it okay to say that is not okay for me. I'm uncomfortable with that. And when do they, tolerate the fact that everybody has differences? It's a fine line sometimes. So we start small in order to be able to build muscles for our daughter so she can feel confident to use her voice, to recognize that her no means no, and to prepare her for a world that honestly wants to violate boundaries all over the place. And we'll take advantage if she doesn't stand confident in her walk with God and knowing that her relationships can back her up. Protect her. So Mom, I want you to think about your own relationship with boundaries. There's a fantastic book, it's been around a long time, called Boundaries, written by Dr. Townsend and Dr. Cloud. It's the foundation that almost every believer should read and understand God's sense of boundaries and how do we do this in healthy relationships. So if you can read that book if you want a little bit more shoring up yourself. And at the end, a confident girl knows that healthy relationships have healthy boundaries, and she knows how to navigate that. And you're going to be helping her to do that over the next many years. One last thing. I provided you with an opportunity to talk with your daughter about how to protect her own body. This is an optional activity for you to do sometime later this month, maybe after your date. It's an option to process what it would be like if a boy was pressuring her or a girl was pressuring her to do something that was harmful to her body, sexual in nature. It's basically an abuse prevention role play for you to do. And I want you to build trust with your daughter to practice these. Throughout her growing teen years, she's going to need to practice and remember that she can stand up for herself. And so this role playing might feel a little early at this age. But honestly, most of girls who have had any sort of violation have had experience sometime between the ages of 5th grade all the way to age 18. I'd rather you start with her earlier than later. And this will help her build confidence to know that if she's in a comparable situation and is not feeling safe, that she can do something about it. This is going to be an important conversation. I think I say that every single month, but I do believe that each of these are meant for such a time as this. And you, my friend, are the right mama for the job.